Hello and welcome back to the channel. As you get older, you have many life lessons to learn, or you learn through your failures and mistakes. I had one of those, but it didn't have a happy outcome for an individual as part of this story, but I did learn some massive lessons, and yeah, part of that is don't lie to your boss or employer, and also don't lie to your wife, or my wife at that time. So I was working in a creamery at this point, and it was a large factory, and the shifts were kind of, I can't remember if there was a 3 on 4 off or 4 on 4 off, but it was going to happen over the weekend that this massive swell was going to hit Cornwall and Devon, or the southwest of the UK. And at that point I was medically fit enough and mentally strong enough to deal with paddling out and riding large waves. A little bit of a different situation now. I still enjoy surfing, but I like moderate to small conditions now. That's just basically how things have transpired for me over the years. But I'd been tracking this storm for a long period of time, and I was really gutted that it was going to fall over the weekend as well, because quite simply every man and his dog was going to be getting classic waves, or the guys that could ride the surf, you know, at that particular size, were going to be getting what was predicted to be some of the best surf of the year or the season. So, and I was going to miss out, quite simply because I was working in this factory. But I had a heavy mortgage, a wife, 3 kids, and I needed to be responsible. I was the sole earner, so all the bills fell on me. Nothing unusual about that, but it did place that pressure on me. So, you know, I wasn't as free as what I'd liked to be. But sometimes, and it did happen sometimes, the inner surfer would get the better of me and everything would go by the wayside in the pursuit of chasing surf. Now the swell did actually arrive as predicted, and it was shaping up to be awesome. Big low pressure just off the southwest of the UK, Cornwall, Devon and South Wales and Ireland. It was really pushing massive surf in, and we had an easterly wind coming up from southern Europe, and it was creating beautiful, perfect big surf and powerful. So Saturday, people were getting some of the best rides that they'd had all year. Like I said, the ones that could ride surf like that. The Sunday, the surf dropped significantly in size, but it was still big, it was still powerful, and to be honest with you, it was probably more manageable, and people would have had the time of their lives if you were a surfer. Waves galore, big, powerful, but manageable, and you were going to get everything that you wanted as a surfer. The thing is, I was rotated on, so the Saturday and Sunday I obviously went into work on shift, feeling pretty miserable and sorry for myself that, you know, Lady Luck had conspired against me, that it wasn't my 3 or 4 days off that this swell was happening. And I couldn't let it go. It sat in my head. So a plan formulated, a cunning plan. And that consisted of me, Sunday evening when I got home, I just went about my daily business when I got home, what I had to do. But I loaded my surfboard and wetsuit in the car. Now, my wife had no idea, or my wife at the time had no idea what I was about to do. I didn't say anything, and everything just seemed as normal at home, other than the fact I'd secretly loaded my surfboard and my wetsuit, and I'd phoned work and pulled a sickie. I was going to go sick, so Monday morning I could at least get the last drops of that swell, so at least I could say I was on it. Monday was still going to be offshore, but the swell was dropping dramatically off, and in fact on the lower tide there wouldn't have been any surf at this particular location. I had to be there in first thing in the morning, a dawn session, to get that last pulse of swell, and even then it would only have been shoulder height, head height, but I would have at least had something of it, and I was keyed up, I was excited. Like I said, I'd pulled a sickie, and I was lying to my wife basically because I wasn't going into work. I was heading off for a surf first thing in the morning. So I got up pretty much around about the same time and drove to this location, and it was another town away, and once I'd got there I'd parked the car, and it was kind of a little bit of down country lanes to get to this surf spot. At the time it was kind of like a closely guarded secret, but I see on social media now it's all over the place. It's hardly a secret anymore. But in any case, there was nobody there. I could see evidence, tire tracks, people were there that over the weekend, and it would have been rammed. The place, there was tire tracks everywhere, up the hedges, in the verges, you know, along the road. You could see it had been extremely busy. You didn't need to be a detective to work that out with just what you could see on the ground. So I parked my car up, and there was another car there, and I got kitted up. I wasn't hanging about, and another chap turned up, and he walked to his car. He was with his nephew, but in any case he was going to go for a surf, and we exchanged pleasantries, and I made my way down the track towards the surf. He was hot on my heels. He was pretty, you know, speedy because he wanted to get in. He knew the same as me. That surf was going to disappear, and disappear fast. So we knew we only had about an hour and a half of surf due to the tide dragging back, and it would suck the life out of the swell and it would disappear. So yeah, I made my way down across the fields, the muddy tracks, and got to the cliff edge. And I could see in the distance he wasn't too far behind me. Been and got his stuff. I scrabbled down over the cliff, got onto the pebbles, and started making my way down to the reef. It wasn't a sandy beach, it was boulders and reef, which is basically all rock. So I was walking along to basically the position I enter the water on that reef. There's like a deep water channel that you can paddle out, and as I was walking down to it, I noticed two shoes or boots or something of that nature sticking up, almost like penguin feet, if that makes any sense, but splayed slightly apart. Now, there's nothing unusual about finding or seeing shoes on the coast. I don't know how, but the coast is awash with flip-flops, boots, trainers, shoes of all kinds just seem to wash up. I've got no idea. It just seems like one of the things the sea does. It washes up footwear here, there and everywhere. So I wasn't overly concerned. But in any case, I carried on making my way down to this point. I was going to enter the water, and it just sat in the back of my mind because it didn't look right how they were actually sitting on the boulders which I was below. Now, most of us, we have intuition, or we get a bad vibe or a feeling, or something inside you stirs and you can't walk away from what you've seen. Even though your mind is sort of saying, oh, it's nothing, just carry on, there's something in your core which makes you go, that doesn't sit or feel right. And that got the better of me, so I put my board down and I scrabbled back up over the boulder bank, and I could see this footwear, and it was on a slight little concave where the action of the waves had caused a higher ridge that you could look and see the footwear, but behind it was a bit of a concave. And sadly there was a lady there lying with her feet facing out over the edge of the boulder ridge, and she was lying in it. Well, I was in massive shock at this point, you know, as you can imagine. Speechless, almost frozen for a few seconds. I kind of got myself together and gingerly, you know, walked over. Didn't know what to think. Was somebody just taking a rest, a nap, or asleep? But things, you know, your brain starts to click in very fast, and you can see things ain't right, or you know, straight away. And you know, I started, you know, calling gently, you know, to start with. Are you all right? Are you all right? And you know, and just making a gingerly moving towards her, just trying to talk, saying, you know, you're right. You know, it might sound stupid, but it's those are the sort of things you do. So I made my way over and just casually observed what I could see with my eyes, and sadly I could see that she was no longer with us. Now by this point I had clearly stopped, you know, making the gestures of, you know, are you all right, or can you hear me? And I'll be blatantly honest with you, I didn't want to start pushing and pulling and rifling around with the deceased lady. She was clearly no longer with us. I've you know, seen enough death at this point to know yeah, what death looks like. So yeah, I was fully aware of what I was looking at. I quickly got myself together, started looking around. I didn't know what to do. I didn't have a phone with me. I did have, it was an old Nokia I had, if you can remember that far back. I think this happened in must be 2008ish. I think this happened. But I had an old Nokia type thing, like a little small brick type thing, and that wasn't with me in any case. And I think mine was out of credit or charge at this point, but in any case that wouldn't have helped me. But I noticed the other guy was just actually starting to basically come down the same route as I had. So I ran over, said, and showed him what I'd found. And you know, we were both in shock, and we returned to the cars where he did have a phone, and I made the 999 call. And yeah, after a lot of questions, and by the police lady, I take it was a police lady on the switchboard, I had to give all the information, the circumstances. You can imagine what I had to, the information they wanted from me. They did ask me if I'd, you know, tried to, you know, resuscitate or do anything. And I clearly said no, because I could evidently see that she was no longer with us. She was deceased. And they said that they were sending, you know, a unit to our location. And we were to basically wait there for their arrival. Now it wasn't long till we heard police sirens in the distance, and they were getting closer and closer, and then we realised they were obviously gone past us. They were going away from us, and they'd gone down to another lane which reached another part of this coastal cliff section, which was about half a mile to a mile away. I can't remember if we re-phoned and re-gave them directions, or whether they figured out they'd hit the wrong area and double take a turn and come back to us. But in any case, they did make it to us, and I believe it was a man and woman police. The two police officers were. Yeah, I think it was a man and woman. My memory's a bit fuzzy, but in any case, they were in their normal police uniform. This track that you have to go down goes across a very boggy field and footpath, and in some parts you can disappear up to, well, basically almost your calf. So you can imagine them in their nice clean police uniform and black shoes having to follow us down this path. They were caked in mud, slipping and sliding. They weren't equipped for the terrain that we were going on. We were in our wetsuits and obviously had wetsuit boots, so it made no difference how muddy we got. But it did pose, you know, in a, you know, I don't know how to use the word, a comical effect watching these police officers trying to follow us down across this boggy field. You know, it's a tragic circumstance, make no bones about it, it wasn't funny, but watching them try to negotiate the footpath did have a little bit of comedy about it. But in any case, we got them down to the cliff, and we took them over to the deceased lady, and that's when it all started to get real for me. So me and the other surfer were kind of separated, and statements were taken. More police turned up, detectives turned up, and obviously they started examining the deceased lady, the scene, the top of the cliff, everywhere. And yeah, we were constantly being grilled on what we were doing there, you know, at probably stupid o'clock in the morning. And obviously, unless you were a surfer and understood the circumstances about surrounding the tides and trying to catch the swell, it might seem a little bit strange that two guys were, you know, early doors trying to catch waves when they could have quite easily done it during the day. But all that kind of like came out in the wash. So yeah, next thing we knew, a helicopter was being called for because they couldn't extract the body. So we had the big yellow helicopter come and pick up the deceased lady from the shoreline at the bottom of the cliff. But they did actually let me and the other guy go into the surf. We were sitting around and we kind of said, look, you know, because time was going on, the tide was dragging back off the reef, and they kindly let us go for a surf, believe it or not. But the surf was over, like I explained at the beginning of this video. As the surf dragged back out over the reef, the size went to a point, you were scraping the rocks and boulders, and it wasn't worth being in there. So we got out. But yet again, once we got out, we were separated and faced with another load of questions. But before we entered the water, one of the police officers that had been on the cliff came down, and they were talking amongst themselves, and they were discussing how, what, when and why, and it was within earshot, and one of them was sort of saying, could she have been pushed? You know, and instantly kind of made my adrenaline start pumping. I was possibly in the wrong place at the wrong time. So I got out of the surf along with the other guy, and like I said, after more questions we were allowed to go home and go our ways. And that was the last time I ever saw that other surfer. But what came afterwards was a whirlwind of problems for myself. You see, I was somewhere I shouldn't have been. I should have been hard at it on the factory floor. My wife assumed I was hard at it on the factory floor. So I now had to go home, sit down my ex-wife and tell her that whole story, and the fact, because police were involved and may need to verify stories about me supposedly should have been at work but I was skiving, and check out my whole backstory, that I could be rumbled. And that would lead to obviously me being sacked, because basically I'd pulled a sickie and I should have been at work. Now my ex, you know, didn't actually believe me, because there was no evidence, there was no phone calls to our home address where we were living, and nobody had turned up there. Nobody had informed her of the situation officially except me. And it went on for several hours during the day, and it got to the point we had to go shopping. I remember that because I can't remember if we went to Bude or Bideford shopping, but in any case we went shopping and came home, and there it was, police cars outside our house. And that was when it suddenly got real for my wife as well then. So we went in, and it wasn't one car with a few police in it. It actually was looked like they'd all taken one vehicle each, so it looked a lot worse to the neighbours than it actually was. But in any case, they wanted statements again. The whole situation was explained to me. I was told, you're not planning on leaving the country or nothing like that. You know, and as jokingly as that may sound, that starts to get you instantly blood pressure going. And like I said, because of the circumstances and what we'd overheard, it kind of made things just, my heart was sinking. So I was left in suspense for about 3 or 4 days with all this hanging over my neck, expecting the police to turn up at work to verify my story and everything like that. And, you know, for them to check out me, who I was, you know, the surf situation and why we were there, to match up my story with the other surfer, to find out who the deceased lady was and what her circumstances were, and go through her backstory to see possibly why she was in the situation she was in and how she was where she was. So yeah, 3 to 4 days before I got the police turn up again. And that's when I got told basically that they were happy and content with my story. They weren't going to contact work, and they checked out the deceased lady, and I'm not going to go into that because obviously that's private, but everything was, they were happy with everything their end, although her situation was not a happy one obviously. But it kind of let me take a deep breath and calm down again. Now, I did get another visit from the police, and that was basically a formality that they were going to use my phone message. They said I had to be available and ready to go to the coroner if I was requested to be there, but they were happy and sufficient that the phone call at this point and what I'd relayed on that phone call was going to be enough for the coroner from my end as the person who found her, the surfer that found her. So that kind of elated some fears, and they also, you know, actually said that they were not going to use my name in conjunction with that story, so obviously nobody at work would find out that I was somewhere I shouldn't have been on the day I should have been at work. So I never did get requested to go to the coroner's hearing, and on top of that, when it was relayed to the media, or the media was involved, I was only referred to as a surfer that found her, and I was grateful for that, because obviously that saved me a lot of aggravation. Like I said at the beginning of the video, you have to understand, I was a single earner with a big mortgage, 3 kids and a wife to support, so this whole situation put everything in jeopardy by my stupidity of lying to my ex-wife and obviously my employer to chase surf. I was going to say just to chase surf, but it was almost a it was a lifestyle and a lifestyle choice for me. I would surf 3 times a day if I was on my day off, and I had the opportunity in the long summer days. But that still doesn't excuse the fact that I put everything on the line and I got caught out simply because I was somewhere I shouldn't have been, and I shouldn't have been there, quite simply because I'd lied and put myself in that position to two people, my boss and my wife. Now, as for the deceased lady, I never really did get much of a backstory. Much said to me. I got enough information for me to, at the time, to be happy and content with what I'd been told. But as time has gone on and where I am now in life, occasionally, just occasionally, I will think back to that morning of finding her, and I can still picture her now, and I do actually have questions that I do ask myself in my head. Who actually was she? What did she do? You know, what was her backstory, her life, and everything like that. But obviously I've never pursued or tried to find out. I don't feel it's my place to, but that one incident, that one morning, still sits with me, and I still do think of her to this day. So you're probably wondering, why I've actually told you this story. At the time it could have cost me my home personally, because I was on reasonably good money. I had to put the hours in. I was on 12-hour shifts, and I used to do a lot of overtime at the time, and I was able to get reasonable money, and it's money for me and my qualifications I probably wouldn't have been able to earn anywhere else, and I stupidly put all that in jeopardy. But it's just the fact that last night I had a massively hectic day. I had logs being delivered, school runs, sticks, deliveries. I was really back against the wall. It was a massive rush day. My wife had things going on, and the day was totally manic. And it was the last thing in the evening. The house had gone quiet. The wife and kids had gone to bed. The dogs were sat down by the fire. And I was just sat at the table, and it was totally dead still and quiet. And that morning crept into my head, and those questions came into my head, like, who was she, and what was her backstory and situation that led her to do that to herself. And yeah, just occasionally I give that poor lady a thought. So in conclusion, in summary, on a lighter note, I'm just going to say, don't ever lie or try and pull a fast one. Because if you can take one thing from this story that I've just told you, you may think you're on top of the game. You might think that you're pulling the ultimate, scheme, or you're pulling off something that's going to lead to your personal happiness, and you're really on top of the game. There might just be a chance it might all backfire, and it could backfire spectacularly, and you too could find yourself in the wrong place at the wrong time, regretting that you ever lied and you tried to pull a fast one. Take care, stay safe, and I hope to catch you guys on the trail. And just on this footnote, before I do actually sign off, if you ever do find yourself struggling, don't do it alone. Talk to somebody, talk to a doctor, talk to a professional, just talk to somebody, and start getting things put together so you can start to have a recovery plan. You don't need to suffer on your own and by yourself.